Canada is an immigrant country. 20% of Canadians are from elsewhere. And since the 70s, there's also been a larger number of immigrants coming from non-European countries. But it was in the 70s and 80s where there started to be larger and larger waves of people coming from India, Pakistan, China, South America, Central America. A really interesting thing happened in the 1990s in both Canada and the US. And that's that the violent crime rate began to drop, and it began to drop quite significantly and quite dramatically. A bunch of researchers, mostly sociologists and criminologists in the US and to a lesser extent in Canada, have been looking at the relationship between immigration and crime. What these researchers have noticed is that the crime rate has actually been dropping quite significantly both in the US and in Canada, and at the same time, immigration rates have been rising. Was the presence of immigrants and was the increase in immigration actually making Canada and the US safer? These are not just two things that are happening coincidentally, but there is likely a cause and effect relationship between increasing immigration and the decrease in violence.
I'm Ronit Dinivitzer. I'm an assistant professor of sociology at the University of Toronto.
I'm Ron Levy. I'm an associate professor of criminology at the University of Toronto. What is so important to see in this study was that the composition of those high schools had changed dramatically over that time period. It was only once the results came back, we found that youth delinquency in those schools had dropped precipitously between 1976 and 1999.
And what we found was a really compelling story, and a new story to help explain why there was reduced delinquent activity. And the answer was a complex set of steps. So the first step is that they had particularly close relationships with their parents. They had bonds with their mothers and their fathers. They talked to them about their thoughts and feelings, and they wanted to have their mothers and fathers be role models for them. And that kind of relationship with their parents led to increased educational commitment. These commitments to school also resulted in what is called risk aversity, and that is basically these kids were less likely to engage in risky activity.
And the striking thing about our findings is that it was the students in these schools from non-European ethnicities who were first and second generation immigrants themselves who had more of the kinds of things that predict or produce these sorts of this sort of risk aversity.
And so what we would like to try to learn from this is that perhaps there is fewer engagement in illegalities by recent immigrants to Canada. One of the unique features of this study was that the students in this high school came from 40 different countries.
What we don't find is that it's one particular ethnic group that has somehow reduced the youthful illegalities for the whole group. Among all recent immigrants to Canada, one found this package of good stuff, as we call it.
All the young adults from these countries were engaging in fewer delinquent activities.
When you think about it, it makes sense. These are people who have left everything that's familiar behind them, and they're coming to a place and having to start new, often with very few ties, with very few connections in Canada. And so these tend to be people who are hardworking, they're resilient, they're optimistic, they're striving, they're ambitious, and these are qualities that are naturally, in a way, going to lead to success. These are the qualities we should want more of in our country. After reading the University of Toronto study, I wanted to see whether these findings played out in other communities. So I went to Thorncliffe Park, which is a very heavily immigrant-populated community. It's a poor community, and it's a community that has a lot of density in its housing. It's also an incredibly vibrant community. It has a lot of things that make it a successful community. Because of its very density, what happens in Thorncliffe is it becomes very safe because people are out on the streets. And so the kids there, like the kids in the University of Toronto study, have a lot of similar qualities. And the middle school there is actually one of the largest middle schools in the country. It has 1,200 students that speak 50 different languages. So I thought this would be a perfect community to see whether these statistics around immigration and crime bore out, because the community has some factors which puts it at risk for crime, poverty being one of them. And in police terms, a community with that kind of density and that number of young people is a community that people often worry can be at risk for crime. I met Amir Sakara when I was asking around in the community for somebody who could talk to me about the young people in the community and show me around. And Amir grew up in Thorncliffe Park. He is sort of the unofficial Thorncliffe ambassador. He seems to know everybody in the community, everybody's on his speed dial on his cell phone. And he is really committed to making the community a better place.
I actually grew up in Thorncliffe Park. I spent most of my life here in Thorncliffe. And then when the youth center opened up, I just saw it as an opportunity to give back to the community through the agency, what it needed. And like all the little things that I thought I wanted growing up, I tried not to forget what they were. And through the agency, I saw an opportunity to bring those dreams to life for the youth living here. And I see the benefits of it. We've informed people, so it's a place of information really for kids, for some of the things that are available to them that they might not have known about. It's just a central hub. It's located centrally in the neighborhood as well.
The way it works in Thorncliffe Park is what Jane Jacobs, the urban living guru, called eyes on the street. So in Thorncliffe Park, if you're a kid, your parents might be busy, and parents are. They're working, really grinding jobs. But there's an auntie or a neighbor or a cousin or a friend of the family who's watching, who's seeing what's going on. And even physically in the space, you have that sense of these balconies that overlook the streets. And so, a way, I think it creates a really insular community, and probably one that feels a bit claustrophobic for teenagers. But it also creates a really safe community. You can't get up to trouble.
I really feel it's because of the fact that everyone knows each other, really. So if you do anything, before you get home, your mom already knows you did it. So there's that sense of everyone's watching you, and everyone's really, everyone, and everyone's pretty much related somehow, some way. So you definitely try your best to be at your best behavior at all time. Respect's a big thing in our culture. So you're starting to see more kids lean towards university. You see a lot of kids that have ambition and are trying to become something. And a lot of the kids appreciate the struggles that their parents have gone through, and you could sense that just from talking to them. So you don't want to let your parents down.
One of the things that's actually quite great about Thorncliffe Park is that the young guys there are completely obsessed with hockey. And it's interesting because, they obviously haven't grown up with a family tradition of hockey, because most of their parents come from places that people don't play hockey. So in addition to sports like cricket and soccer, where there might be a more natural, familial affinity and history of those kinds of sports, kids are really obsessed with hockey in the community.
We love hockey. We want to bring ice hockey to this community.
It gives kids something to do that's not hanging out at the mall or loitering in the parks. The kids are like kids anywhere, really, but there really is a sense of politeness, civility.
There's a sense of pride for sure. I think the kids, more than the parents, assimilate very quickly and they understand the world, and they hold on and preserve their culture. And I think their culture brings a lot of good values, and I think Canada obviously has the greatest morals and ethics, I think, in the world. And I think they combine the two, and that's what makes this community so amazing.
I mean, the good news of this research is that, contrary to a lot of the negative stereotypes about immigrants, this research is really stacking up more and more evidence to indicate that immigrants are beneficial to society, not just when it comes to lowering crime rates, but just in, bringing these general good qualities. The interesting thing, though, and the thing that's really hopeful, is that Canadian society continues to be safer because of the presence of these people and because of the good qualities they bring. This is the changing reality of Canada, and while a lot of newcomers haven't yet found their place into the arenas of power, like politics or the head of industry or business, it's only a matter of time until they do.